One guy is headed back onto the field. Another guy can't stay on the field. Eury Perez getting the start on Monday. He is back. Jazz Chisholm Jr. on Saturday's game exits the game for the Marlins. Tons to get into on an emergency podcast on a Sunday. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England. Welcome to Locked On Marlins. This, of course, is your daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK. If you are listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe, leave a review. Everything much appreciated. This is your team every day, and thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. There is a YouTube channel. Strongly recommend you get on over there. Hit subscribe there also. The channel, guess what? It's called Locked On Marlins. See what we did there? Hit subscribe, guys. If you are watching, you will have the graphics. You will have the rundown to help you. You will see, firstly, it is early on a Sunday-ish. Early if you're East Coast time anyway. There is no guest. Just me, but an emergency podcast. Craig Mish dropping the news. After yesterday's game, the Marlins end up losing the game 9-8, even though they put up 8 runs and were up 5-0. They somehow find a way to lose that one. We're going to dig into that. But the news then drops. Eury Perez will be back. Recorded a podcast yesterday, so a bonus episode on a Saturday, talking about Eury Perez, and he should be back for the Yankees series. He still will be back for the Yankees series. However, he will also be back for the Red series on the road. Eury Perez will be joining the Marlins on Monday in Cincinnati as the Marlins look to snap what has been a putrid streak after the All-Star break. Spoke about it yesterday, there is some connection between Eury Perez being optioned and the Marlins becoming putrid. We're going to see if it was Eury Perez all along or whether they're just playing poorly. Could be a bit of both, but Eury Perez is going to be back and he's going to be pitching on Monday, his first game back. And the reaction is, I was tweeting during the game yesterday, the Marlins, I think, regret making this move. I feel like they made the wrong move. And even though that's the situation they've landed themselves in, it feels like they're now rushing Eury Perez to come back up. They sent him down to Double-A, Pensacola. He was in a kind of no-throw, competitive innings anyway. I think it was doing some bullpens, whatever it might be, just keeping kind of loose. Eury Perez then being built back up at Double-A. So he's only had 2 outings while he's been there. One of them was a 2 1/3. The next one is for 3 1/3. Vintage Eury Perez, I guess, in many ways. A couple of earned runs, actually, 5 earned runs across the 2 outings. But the reality is, at this moment in time, he is still being in build-up mode. And what can the Marlins expect from him on Monday? And the overriding reason for making this move was to protect him from a health perspective. They've shut him down, and then they've built him back. They've had to build him back up, and now they're rushing it. Why are the Marlins rushing it? Is there panic? Yes, there is. There is panic because they couldn't get a deal done at the deadline for a legit starter. They were in for Lance Lynn. They were maybe in for a few others. They couldn't get a deal done for a major league innings eater. They got Ryan Weathers. We're going to talk about him after the ad as well. But they didn't get that deal done. They then weren't anticipating, I don't think when they sent Eury Perez down anyway, they weren't anticipating the need, and it has been a need, to option Edward Cabrera also down to Triple-A. The Marlins weren't banking on that. A few months ago as well, they were banking on Trevor Rogers being back, and that was going to maybe be the replacement, the way to swap in one for the other. Trevor back, Eury Perez down. We'll save him for later in the year. Trevor hasn't made it back. Eddie Cabrera had to go down to Triple-A because he's just too inaccurate at this point. He's too loose, too wild. Had to be done. Overall, with this decision, the principles I understand. However, the reality has now kicked in with this decision that they didn't have another arm to come up and fill those innings. They haven't been able to add one at the deadline. And also, they've had to send one of the other guys back down as well. The Marlins were so thin at pitching, starting pitching at the major league level, and they've been pressed into doing what they absolutely shouldn't be, which is being haphazard, let's call it. Promoting Eury Perez at this point is probably the most dangerous situation. They could have carried it on. They could have carried on the spell at the major league level. They decided not to. If they're going to shut him down, they should commit to that pathway. They're now asking him to jump out of sync and come back up to the major league level. And what's he going to have? A 75 pitch limit? I don't know, something in that kind of range. I'm not sure what the Marlins are doing here with this one. Seems like knee-jerk and panic. Panic has set in. The team's not playing well. They're struggling for length out of the rotation at times. They effectively had a glorified bullpen game yesterday. They came out of the All-Star break with a bullpen game, game 3? They sent Eury down, but they just didn't have a plan for those innings in the meantime. They banked on Eddie Cabrera. They banked on adding at the deadline. They haven't done either. Neither's panned out. Now, it's a panic move from the Marlins, and it's dangerous. This could absolutely blow up in their faces. It really could. However, we don't hope. Well, I'm not hoping for that. I'm hoping Eury Perez strolls back in and is the catalyst to the Marlins kicking on. Let's make this a positive one. But the mishandling of Eury Perez since this All-Star demotion has been baffling. But we are where we are. We're still in the hunt. And the Marlins need Eury Perez to be back and pitching like he was before. Can he do it? Don't know. We don't know. He's out of sync now. He was rolling earlier on. That's why I always said, keep the good vibes rolling. Keep Eury Perez rolling. And if he runs out of bullets later in the year, so be it. Now they've tried to preserve him, but now they've made a panic decision to get him back. If you have a plan, stick with it. They haven't stuck with it. But Eury Perez is back, and the Marlins badly, badly need him. So we're going to see him on Monday. We're then also going to see him on Sunday, I think, against the Yankees. And so he's going to slot into the rotation and effectively be building himself back up. Boy, oh boy. Feels like a bit of a mess. But overall, the Marlins and the fans, anyway, we get to see Eury again, which is a positive. Massive series against the Reds. The Marlins and Reds are absolutely in competition for the wildcard spots this year. They really are. The Reds, whilst the Marlins have been poor, the Reds have maybe been as poor or even worse recently. So that is going to be a wild game. The Diamondbacks equally have fell well back too. So mentioned it on yesterday's pod. Few of these teams, they're all scuttling together. These teams that have emerged, the Marlins included, Marlins, Reds, Diamondbacks, those three in particular, that are surprise packages this year. People weren't expecting them. You could say the Giants too, but those three, I would say, the most surprising three. All three of them facing struggles straight after the All-Star break and after the deadline too. So the Marlins need to play well against a competitor. They actually played pretty well against the Phillies recently. It didn't go their way, 1-3 in that series, but I felt like they played better ball than 1-3 represented. Obviously, the Robertson blown game, didn't help to that. So it was very close, but I do think this series now against the Reds, critical, and Eury Perez will be back and will be starting in game 1. Sandy Alcantara will be going today on Sunday's game against the Rangers. The Marlins, again, had a real big opportunity to win the game. Going up 5-0. Jazz Chisholm Jr. was back in the lineup. He was making things happen. Jazz Chisholm Jr. then caught stealing, grabs his hamstring, walks off muttering away, then exits the game. Then all of a sudden, Soriano, who was cruising, gave up a bomb. Then, in a leverage spot, the Marlins leading at this point by 2 runs, they turned to a debutant, Ryan Weathers, out of the bullpen. His first ever Marlins appearance. And it was one of the biggest leverage spots. Couldn't get it done. Interesting decision. Even when the offense kept them in it, they just kept rolling Weathers out there. That just shows how gassed the pen is right now. This was a predetermined plan here from Skip Schumacher. It was Soriano and Weathers. And if we get a lead late in the game, maybe we've got Tanner Scott. But if we are not leading, then it's going to be Weathers' season. Weathers, he almost went 100 pitches out of the bullpen. Didn't even get through 4 innings, by the way, which kind of talks to the inconsistency there. A lot of walks, home runs as well, a couple of bombs. Pitched okay, did a job. But from a Marlins perspective, they really should be winning that game. Jazz Chisholm Jr., after the game, you could see disappointed. He left the game at 5-0, and he exited the game because they were 5-0 up. I'm going to talk about Jazz's injury shortly, but before we do that, tell you about our good friends over at eBay Motors. Yes, sir. And firstly, you got the graphics up, but for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to my garage or garage, however you pronounce that one, and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. You get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride! eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All right, guys, here we are on a Sunday episode of Locked On Marlins. Joining me, Peter Pratt. Eury Perez is going to be back for the Marlins. They have announced he will be starting the game in Cincinnati on Monday. Sandy Alcantara going this evening, this afternoon, this morning, depending on your time zone, against the Texas Rangers as the Marlins look to avoid the sweep. Will Jazz Chisholm be in the lineup today? There is a lefty going firstly, but equally, Jazz exits the game yesterday with hamstring cramps. That, to me, was the best case scenario there with Jazz. The slightly frustrating thing here with Jazz, I mean, there's a ton of frustrating things, and clearly Jazz frustrated, Skip Schumacher frustrated, the fan base frustrated with this situation with Jazz. He has to stay on the field, and the Skip has spoken about how they're going to manage Jazz more effectively, not just throw him in there and ask him to be Superman day after day after day after day after coming back, easing him in. They're doing the same with Avi Garcia, bit of split time for now. We'll see how it plays out. Even with that, the management of Jazz, he was off the day before. Even with that situation, Jazz then still gets a cramp in his hamstring. Not optimal. Jazz was really, I would say, disappointed. Felt very disappointed after the game, speaking about how he's doing everything he can. He feels like he's preparing well. He's looking after himself at all times. And for some reason, this keeps happening. Jazz doesn't know why. You're talking about LeBron James spending $1 million a year to get his body right, and maybe Jazz needs to do the same. Maybe the Marlins need to do the same. I guess I'm not sure Jazz has got $1 million hanging around per annum. So wait to see on that one. But hugely frustrating. However, best case news, when I saw the hamstring, I thought, oh man, here we go. This could be another month. Another month for Jazz. So will Jazz Chisholm Jr. be in the lineup today on Sunday after exiting the game with a cramp and also going against a lefty? You would assume not. I would think that Jazz probably would have sat out anyway with the lefty going. So I think this gives him even more reason. But Jazz coming out saying, I'm available for tomorrow, is how he felt. We've heard this before with Jazz. We have to call that out. He is not the best at assessing the injury in his health and his body and the ability to play baseball the next day. He looks at, I'd say, with a half or a glass half full is maybe the outlook from Jazz. It's more than full, I guess, the way he looks at it. But I think the expectation is that Jazz doesn't play today. But I think the expectation is that he's going to be okay. And coming into this Red Series, he will be a part of that series. It's a huge, not a positive, but it's huge for the Fish that it isn't something more serious, because they need Jazz. Skip spoke about it after the game as well. We need Jazz on the field. Everyone needs Jazz on the field, and Jazz wants to be on the field. So, it looked scary. It looked worrying. We got, I'd say, the best case news that it was just a cramp. He felt like he could go back in there, being 5-0 up. Take a seat, Jazz. Makes sense. Ryan Weathers' debut. Ryan Weathers, boy, oh boy. He was asked to get into the trenches yesterday. I don't think the pen had much, if anything, really available. Soriano getting the start. He had 65 to 75 max, I think. I think they always felt 3 to 4 was best case scenario for Soriano. Cruised through 3 innings, then ended up giving up the 3-run bomb. Okert then had to come in and, tidy up a bit as well, which he did. pretty effectively, which was good. But then it was over to Ryan Weathers. This is your game now. And after that first inning, I thought, okay, tough start for Weathers. Then he rolled out for the second inning. I was like, wow. The Marlins were bang live in that game. Weathers at that point really struggling. He'd already kind of given up the lead at that point. He was back out there. That just shows you right now, at that moment in time, how gasolinated this bullpen is. Because Weathers shouldn't have been out there in that situation. With the Marlins leading by a couple of runs, they should be turning to AJ Puk at that point. Brazaban even, a guy who's been around and in the pen most of the year. I know he was recalled on the day, but, Puk, Brazaban, Scott, we saw him loosen up as well. Didn't end up seeing him in the game. But, they're leading the game on the road against the most dangerous AL offense. And they just turned to Ryan Weathers in a leverage spot for his debut out of the pen after he's had a real rough go of it at the major league level. That decision was driven by the fact that the pen is just gasolinated. I'm surprised that he was put in that spot. There was a great spaces after the game. It migrated from a Noble Meyer rundown to a Eury Perez and a wider conversation. But, Eli Sussman calling it out that, Ryan Weathers, the Marlins just really didn't put him in a position to succeed in that one. And I agree. Completely agree with that. The Weathers, he just had to get in there and weather the storm. Really, that's what was asked of him. And he did that. Overall, to get 95, 96 pitches out of him, just under 4 innings worth of work. That was, again, another confusing one, right? The game at this point, they've let it carry on. It feels kind of like it's drifted away. And then Brazaban comes in for the final out. Why not bring Brazaban in at the start of that inning? I don't know. Frustrating. We're in that phase of the year where you start losing games and you turn to your bullpen because it feels like the bullpen is the crucial kind of factor here. The bullpen before the All-Star break, nails. Everything that Skip did worked. Right now, the team are on a losing streak, and it feels like everything that Skip is doing is kind of going, a little bit sideways. It's born out of the fact that a lot of the starters earlier in the year just couldn't go deep into games. Sandy included. Sandy, Eddie Cabrera, those are, I guess, the main protagonists, but all of them have struggled. They've had Hoeing up there with starts. They've had Soriano now starting. The challenges with the bullpen they're facing into right now are driven by the fact that the rotation just got off to a sluggish start, just couldn't go deep. Bullpen was asked to do so much early, and they did it so effectively. What's happened to AJ Puk? What the hell has happened to AJ Puk? I remember watching him in the first few months and thinking, boy, oh boy, I've not seen a reliever like it. He is electric. Now, it's like meatballs being served up with AJ Puk, and they're getting destroyed. He looks a shadow of himself. He's completely lost his confidence. The Marlins are sliding him backwards and backwards in games to try and build his confidence up, but, this is just synonymous with the whole pen. It's gone backwards at a real rate of knots. Robertson's been acquired. He's come in. He's then getting blown up. So, tough spot for this pen. I have to congratulate or tip my cap to Weathers. That's probably the best way of describing it. Like, he did all he could. He wasn't put in the best spot to succeed. And in the end, he didn't succeed. The Marlins lost the game, even though they scored 8 runs. That's a sign that the offense is doing okay. The offense is doing its part. But all of a sudden now, due to Cabrera being down, Eury Perez being down, Trevor Rogers still not back to health, the Marlins have created this situation where they're just asking too much from the pen, and it's showing now in games and the management of games and Skip Schumacher's management of games. There was a few bright sparks offensively yesterday, but I have to call out Jake Burger, who came in the game for Jazz Chisholm Jr., by the way. Jake Burger with his first Marlins home run. And it wasn't, game was cooked. It was a high leverage spot for Jake Burger there. Marlins down by 3. He absolutely crushes one for a 2-run blast. Burger bomb, first Burger bomb of his Marlins career. Great to see in the 9th inning. That's what we need. That's what we want to see. We've seen that with the fish all year long in the main with the offense. They'll always be scrapping. They'll always be fighting. And there's from 7th inning onwards, it feels like the offense does come alive. Burger doing that in the 9th, great to see. Again, it kind of frustrates you because you look back at should Weathers have been in there for that length of time. Could they have gone with a different reliever? So all of a sudden, that 2-run bomb from Jake Burger becomes either a game-tying or a go-ahead bomb. It's on Skip Schumacher, but it's part of the bigger picture. Guys, it's going to wrap us up for today for Locked On Marlins, a Sunday bonus episode. So I appreciate you making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day, guys. Eury Perez will be back tomorrow. Sandy Alcantara needs to find a way to help the Marlins snap this skid on the road and avoid the sweep. Jazz Chisholm Jr. exits the game yesterday. Hamstring cramps. The best case diagnosis on that one. Do we see Jazz today? I don't think so. Do we see him in Cincinnati? I do think so. Ryan Weathers, he's going to be optioned pretty shortly, probably for Eury Perez, to be fair. And Jake Burger giving us a flash, a sign of what he can do, particularly in a leverage spot. Big home run, big power from the right side. Great to see. Let's see if the Marlins can do it today. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.